expert after expert after expert has been validating every single word that you're saying, like Dr. Jeffrey Morrison, right? Tell me about him.
Dr. Jeffrey Morrison is an individual who has been a medical doctor for many years. But what I love about his story is he started practicing medicine with Dr. Atkins, right?
Yeah, where the truth began. Right?
That's where it began. And what he shares is some of the inside stories around the truth about the work that Dr. Atkins has done and really about his life.
Take a look at this.
Dr. Morrison, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a bit about what got you into medicine and your background.
Well, number one, it's wonderful to be here today, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be with like-minded people. I fortunately had the opportunity to get into a holistic medical practice from a very early age, right out of family practice residency, where I initially started in environmental medicine, where we learned how to take care of patients with allergies, chemical sensitivities, and heavy metal exposure. And people could not tolerate prescription medicine, so we had to think outside the box to use other options like diet, nutrition, and supplements to help people on the way to wellness.
That's remarkable. And when you first started to get into that work, did you see that there was a large group of people dealing with these allergies and these environmental toxins, and have you seen that increase over the years?
I'm kind of in a self-selected patient population, so we see lots of patients that are coming in with different versions of allergies, whether it's with digestive symptoms or skin rashes or just not being able to think clearly. We are seeing many people with all of these symptoms on a very regular basis.
So you had the opportunity to work with Dr. Atkins toward the end of his life. Can you share those experiences that you had and tell us a little bit about the Atkins program in general?
Well, very early on in my career, 3 years out of residency, I had the good opportunity to work at the Atkins Center in 2001, and literally sitting in with Dr. Atkins as he met with new patients and saw how he devised plans for people to treat conditions, everything from obesity to diabetes to even cancer. And many of his strategies revolved around diet modification along with targeted nutritional supplements.
So you spent time with Dr. Atkins as he was treating different patients for a variety of different diseases and ailments?
Yeah, people would come to see Atkins from all across the country, from anywhere in the continental United States to Middle East to Europe. They would come in because they've heard about him through his books and his perspective on diet and nutrition.
So from your perspective, how did you view his perspective? Because there's a lot of misinformation about the Atkins diet.
Well, I feel honored and blessed that I had the opportunity to work with him while he was still in the heyday of his practice. And I was amazed to see how he was able to get such terrific results with patient outcomes from just starting with some fundamental changes in diet modification. And of course, he was well known for his Atkins diet, which was basically a low-carb lifestyle. And remarkably, from just removing sugar out of a person's diet, people were feeling better from digestive issues and allergies and things that I would have never been able to explain previously from just my medical education.
So you were really seeing that this reduction in carbohydrates, this reduction in glucose in general was transformative for individuals that were dealing with allergies and different things?
Yeah, when I was working there, he would generally use his Atkins diet principle for many different health conditions, and people would see pretty substantial improvements from everything from just the allergy rashes on their skin to less allergy symptoms in their head and neck, but also for diseases that were considered much more difficult to treat. Like even with type 1 diabetes, people were starting to reverse their blood sugars, especially if they came early enough. And then people would also follow this for different types of cancers. And he would apply these principles pretty strategically and get great outcomes where people were getting rid of their rashes, clearing up their allergy symptoms, improving their blood sugar regulation, and then potentially even halting or mitigating cancer along with whatever else they were doing.
Why do you think his program and his lifestyle that he focused on so intensely could have these kind of results. Like, can you talk to us a little bit about why this works in the body?
Well, now it's been over 15 years since he's passed away, and I think that there's a lot of work that's been done in the benefits of a low-carb lifestyle, or some people are even now calling it ketogenic, for improving autoimmune conditions, helping to improve mitochondrial function. And now that the science is sort of like unfolding, we're really seeing some remarkable things. And these things revolve around how sugar in and of itself can be quite toxic to the human body, especially when it's out of control like it is in the standard American diet, where people are having, anywhere up to 20 teaspoons of sugar per day per person in America. Mm-hmm. And that's in the form of refined foods like, cereals and sodas and candy. So inadvertently, sugar has been accumulating in people's diets because of misplaced nutritional guidelines imposed on us by the federal government. And now we're really beginning to see like the swing back to where we recognize that it's not about high carb, it's about better balance in a person's life. And then also just eating the right carbs, or now some people need to eat very low carb to correct underlying medical conditions. And the science is there, and it's just a matter of digging into the literature to recognize that it's where it exists.
In Dr. Atkins' practice, people would come from all over the world to have him help them with what sort of diseases. And I always would think about the Atkins diet really as a weight loss lifestyle.
Well, certainly people would come for weight loss, and that was probably the majority of patients that were coming in for blood tests and blood sugar monitoring. But also people from many other different walks of life and health conditions would see him for allergy symptoms, autoimmune conditions, including type 1 diabetes, wow, and also heart disease as well. And it's remarkable to see the transformation in not only what a person looked like on paper, but also in person as their body changed from losing the bloat and the weight and then getting their health corrected from the strategy.
What surprised you the most about what you would see and what you would experience and what you would work on in the practice?
It was really surprising, number one, how people felt so much better when they cut out carbs and increased the fat in their diet.
Right.
People would lose that afternoon fatigue. They would have less food cravings. They would feel more satiated from the foods that they were eating during the course of the day. So, of course, the weight loss aspect was remarkable. But also to see that a person could improve autoimmune conditions by cutting back on the carbs as well. Like, as I said, the type 1 diabetes and also things that we would not even consider, like rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's and other autoimmune conditions, were just improving with less carbs, more fat, and keeping the protein moderate.
Truly remarkable. When you think about this, how many years ago was it?
Well, we're talking in 2001, so it's well over 15 years ago, which is quite dating. But what's remarkable about that time period is that there's now lots of medical literature that's been used to study Atkins-style diets for not only the things that people know about, like for seizure disorders and potentially for cancer treatments, but also helping to improve blood sugar parameters for heart disease, and then also for autoimmune conditions like type 1 diabetes.
So Atkins it sounds as though he was just so ahead of his time.
He was really taking some of the great information that I think he was even learning from some of his own mentors, like Carlton Fredericks, who had educated him about like low-carb diets, and then evolved it into the Atkins diet, which sort of became like a worldwide sensation for the diet aspect. And I think that I had fortunate opportunity to speak with him one-on-one about this, and he always felt like the challenge with the Atkins diet as it became more and more popular was helping to keep people focused on the diet modifications and trying to make sure that they stayed on track with making the right choices. So, like, of course, cutting back the carbs was easy, but then what do you replace it with?
Right.
So now we have like these great opportunities where people are learning and sharing with each other on social media how to find better ways to find healthy fats through things like fat bombs and, eating more coconut products, or also like healthy fats from eating grass-fed meat or free-range chicken. So many more ways to help follow the program in a healthy way.
It's interesting to hear that because there was so much negative press and such a dark cloud that sort of surrounded Dr. Atkins' death that's just not accurate information. And I'd love for you to help us see what really was the correct.
You know, it was really devastating for all of us that worked at the Atkins Center who knew Atkins as a person and an individual who was, really a kind of a leader and role model for all of us. And what was devastating was that we knew him as the person that was following the low-carb lifestyle, and then when he had the unfortunate slip where he hit his head and had this bleeding in his brain that couldn't be stopped, the press sort of took it in a totally different direction, which suggested it was a cardiac issue. And truly it was an unfortunate side effect from him taking fish oils for a health condition that he had.
So can you go back and just really explain to us what happened? So he slipped and he fell. Will you go through more of the detail?
Well, what our Atkins community understands is that he slipped and fell on the ice on a cold winter day in New York City and hit his head and was rushed to the hospital and was found to have a subdural hematoma, which means bleeding in the brain. Now, usually these types of conditions will sort of self-correct, but for him, it did not because he had natural blood thinning effects from being on high doses of fish oil for another medical condition that he had. And because the bleeding on the brain couldn't be stopped, he went into a coma. And then during the resuscitation efforts, he put on probably 20 or 30 pounds of fluid weight as they tried to save him. And unfortunately, it was not going to happen. And he passed.
And so he was in this state of coma. His whole body was swollen. And the information that so many of us heard was that he had had a heart attack and he passed at his heaviest weight. And it was just a misinformation.
Yeah, and, nobody likes to talk about these types of things after the event, or, people will construe information in half of the story. So that what happened because of the slip on the ice, the bleeding on the brain, eventually did lead to events that, of course, would happen for anybody that was in a similar circumstance, where he eventually had more stress on his heart, and he already had an underlying heart condition, so that just made that matters worse. And then they could not stop the bleeding in his brain, which then eventually ended his life.
So the negative press that really surrounds his passing, for many people, it translates, and this is, I think, a sad thing, it translates to them saying, well, that must mean that the diet, the lifestyle program doesn't work, because clearly this situation tells us something different.
People can say what they want about Atkins as an individual, but what you can't say, you can't take anything away from all the hard work that he's done for a low-carb lifestyle, putting money behind what his belief system was when he helped fund the A to Z study on how the Atkins diet really was the best diet of the diets available, showing that after a year of being on the Atkins diet, people tended to lose the most weight and keep it off, and also maintain better cardiac parameters on low carb, moderate protein, and higher fat. That's the truth. And whatever you say about him, it's just I would say, from a person that's worked at the Atkins Center, we loved him dearly and we really cared about him. And I think we all feel that his name gets tarnished because of some people out there.
Well, I hope that through this communication and everyone that watches this, that we all have the opportunity to really look at sort of repairing the misinformation of the history of his passing, and recognize that we're able at this point to be able to learn from so much that he's brought to the table and his life's work.
Yeah, he was the really made it popular, this low-carb diet, the low-carb lifestyle, the Atkins diet, which has then become so many new things and other iterations like the South Beach diet and paleo diet and ketogenic diet programs. These all really come on the coattails of the work that he's sort of established over 15 years ago. And now many people are recognizing that fat is not bad, it's actually good, it's good for a person's health. And too much carbs, which is entered into the American diet, is really the main culprit for increasing the risk for heart disease and other medical conditions as well. So we have a lot to thank Atkins for, and I personally do in my own personal medical practice. And so thankfully I had the opportunity to know and work with him and learn from him.
What a privilege. I was recently with Dr. Steve Anton from the University of Florida, and he had just completed this systematic review of 40 different diets. And the systematic review took several years, and they looked at all of these different parameters with all these different diets. And there were the top 7 diets that came out on top. And those 7 diets were the ones that had the research, the double-blind placebo control. Those were the diets where the individuals lost the most amount of weight and then maintained that weight loss over an extended period of time. And those were diets like the paleo, the DASH diet, all sorts of different diets. But the diet that came out on top, above the zone, above all of the others, by far was the Atkins diet. And we got really excited to see that because there was a big distinction, between the Mediterranean diet, all these different diets, and Atkins. And so what we did is we spent a couple of days and we went back into the individual clinical studies and we looked at the participants and the results that they achieved. And over again, we saw the individuals that were consuming 50% plus of fat, dietary fat in their diet. Those were the ones that were achieving the best results, the most weight loss, and the longest amount of sustained weight loss.
Yeah, so since we've been using this in our practice, I had a personal experience where I had the good opportunity to implement the Atkins strategy for my nephew who was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes a year ago. And immediately when I found out that he went on insulin, I told my brother that we have to act immediately. Go on Atkins-style ketogenic diet, which is less than 20 grams of carbs a day, high fat, moderate amount of protein, and within 5 weeks, he was off insulin. And now here we are a year out, and he's going back to his endocrinologist in Pennsylvania, and he's still getting his hemoglobin A1Cs under 5, which means that he's better than most Americans without using insulin, and he still is considered type 1 diabetic. But what's even more impressive is that there's research right now that's showing high-fat, low-carb diets can actually repair pancreatic cells, so that people with type 1 diabetes, if they act early, can potentially protect and reverse some of the effects of type 1 diabetes. So
what a remarkable
wonderful
experience
hope
for
out
your
there.
whole family. You must be really...
And I owe it all to Atkins.
Oh, that's incredible. What a wonderful story. Tell me a little bit about this acting quickly. So what happens if someone who has type 1 diabetes is listening to you and watching you now, Dr. Morrison? What would you say to them?
Well, we know that there's a window of opportunity where a person that's initially diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, when they are still producing some insulin. The whole issue with type 1 diabetes is that a person is having an autoimmune response where the immune system attacks their own pancreatic beta cells. That means that it attacks the cells that produce insulin and kills it to the point where they can no longer produce insulin. And when a person does not produce insulin, they literally can't utilize sugar for energy. And then all of the effects from eating too much sugar become fully realized, which is that sugar is poisonous to the body without insulin. And that's where people end up in the hospital with diabetic ketoacidosis, where their blood sugars are off the chart and they could be in a coma. So immediately acting upon this by radically transforming the diet to low carb, high fat, moderate protein will quickly remove the trigger and the irritant to the pancreas, because sugar seems to be like a big problem, as well as probably some other food allergens. But by removing sugar and other potential allergens, the immune system will relax. It will stop attacking the pancreas. Whatever cells that are still available producing insulin will still produce insulin, and then a person could find where their correct zone is over a period of time to have some carbs above what is considered ketogenic. And that's what we found with my nephew. And looking at the literature pretty much in depth, there's not a lot published in the United States on this, though there is a worldwide body of knowledge. And we are looking to continue to build on this literature from the positive results of my nephew, but also other patients that have come to see me as well for this. And again, it's just really, I have to give Atkins credit because I would never have thought about this had it not been for him and then the researchers that are tracking this.
It's exciting. It's interesting also to hear you say relaxing the immune system. How do you look at our immune system sort of in today's environment with the work that you do, with so many of your patients coming to you for their issues around toxicity and so forth? Do we all have these tightened immune systems?
Well, because of my background in both environmental medicine and then doing a period with Dr. Atkins to learn about how diet has such a big impact, I'm recognizing, along with many other doctors in this field, that our environment has changed and has created irritants to the immune system. And these irritants come in many different forms, both from eating too much processed foods, potentially not getting enough sleep at night, potentially too much electromagnetic radiation, potentially being nutritionally depleted because food no longer has the nutrition it used to. So we are taking a strong look at a multiple of different variables and recognizing that if some of these things or a number of these things are off, the body dysregulates. And that dysregulation can cause a number of things. Most people know about it because they are more sensitive to the air they breathe because of pollutants, but not everybody gets asthma when it's pollen season. Why do some people and not others? We used to say, well, it's just genetic. Well, it's genetic and environment. And our environment is something that we can definitely make an impact on. So why not just take advantage of the reality that we can impact our own lives by making a few very distinct positive choices for foods we eat, nutritional supplements, exercise, and sleeping the correct amount of hours. And magically, transformations begin to happen where rashes go away, allergies improve, digestive issues go away, and then that's where also there's a potential for the possibility for somebody with autoimmune conditions, from everything from type 1 diabetes to Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease to even more radical autoimmune conditions. And it all comes down to people making better choices with their diet.
I liked what you said about the sleep piece as well. With the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2017 going to the circadian rhythm, for us to start to understand that we have this biological clock that's ticking and all the time, it can be off, it can be on, and depending on how we're sleeping and tying that into the circadian rhythm, do you see that affecting your patients, and are you bringing that into the conversation?
Oh, the sleep is a big deal. And I think Arianna Huffington sort of popularized it in today's world because she's someone that actually takes it seriously, both in her work environment and at home. And her book was an excellent example of that. So we definitely help people to recognize that even though we are living in a 24/7 society, we really need to sort of carve out time for some very important things. Sleep is one of them, and 8 hours is generally the right number. 7.5 to 8.5.
Right.
Teenagers probably need more. Probably as we get older, maybe a little bit less. But if we don't recharge ourselves at night, how do we expect to charge a car up, and that's supposed to work, but we don't charge our bodies? Like, we should take as good care of ourselves as we take care of some of the physical objects in our lives. So that's all it's about. This is something nice that we should do for ourselves.
So you are here with your beautiful family, your 1.5-year-old daughter, and you have another child on the way. Tell us a little bit about what you do in your own life with your family to really protect their health and support.
Well, it's we all try to be role models for our own families, and then also, since I'm a clinician, also for my patients. So I try to create certain patterns in my lifestyle that will allow for grounding to happen at certain times during the day. So I try to get into rituals with having breakfast, lunch, and dinner around the same time, trying to get to sleep and wake up around the same time, and finding a time for myself and hopefully my wife to work out around the same time every day. And by pinpointing certain periods in the day that become rituals that help my body to develop that rhythm, the circadian rhythm has to follow a pattern. And of course, sun and night is part of that pattern, but it's also partly based on what we choose to do in our lives. So having rituals makes a big difference. And then, I of course recognize that there's a physical component to our health. There's also an emotional component. And that emotional component has a lot to do with the belief systems that we have, which has to do with the power of positive thinking, our outlook on life. And we know from so many studies and anecdotal evidence from people that have survived cancer with positive attitudes that those same principles can easily be just used at a day-to-day basis by being grateful for the wonderful things that we have. And so that's what we try to do at home, be grateful for what we have.
Exercise clearly is important in your life with these rituals that you're practicing, and I really appreciate how you ground in those practices. Do you find that exercise can impact the blood sugar levels?
Absolutely. This is another one of the 3 pillars for a person's optimal performance. And fortunately, I've had the good opportunity to work with people at Equinox, which have given me the opportunity to work with trainers with our patients to see how the food, nutrition, and exercise combination makes such a big difference for people's outcomes. So we do definitely know that insulin is the main necessary hormone to drive sugar into cells to be used for energy. But exercise does it too, to a lesser extent. But truly, exercise, we know, especially weight training, can increase muscle mass, which we know then increases metabolism. What does it increase the metabolism of? Well, it increases the metabolism of both fat that's stored, depending on the type of exercise, and also sugar that is floating in the bloodstream. So this gets into a little bit of the nuances of when to time foods. So if a person is looking to lose weight, we generally tell them to eat less carbs before they work out, because then they'll be driving more fat metabolism. Or if they're looking to gain weight, sometimes they will actually have carbs before they work out, which then increases insulin levels, and then it helps them to build muscle mass. So depending on what a person's goals are, there can be a good solution. In addition to diet, nutrition, sleep, and exercise, exercise is a big pillar for best health.
Dr. Morrison, thank you very, very much for this most insightful discussion. It's thrilling to be able to hear from you exactly what your experience was with Dr. Atkins, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. And to learn what you're looking at in the future and what inspires you. And I wish you the very best of health to you and your family.
Naomi, thank you very much for having me, and this is going to be such a wonderful documentary for people to learn how to take better care of themselves in a very healthful way. Thank you.
See, terms like toxicity and things that metabolic rate, those things are the things that most people, when they hear them, they're scared, but there, right there, Dr. Morrison's put it in simple terms for all of us to understand.
You're right.